Welcome back to CBS News 24/7 for continued coverage of the first and only vice presidential debate between Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Republican Senator J.D. Vance. I'm John Dickerson in Times Square at CBS News election headquarters.
And I'm Cecilia Vega, and I am here. We are here with the very best political team in the business. We want to bring our panel back because we are joined by Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett, Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa, Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cortez, and CBS News contributor Ed Gordon. Major, let's start with you. I was struck by seeing Governor Walz pressed on his biographical embellishments. No surprise that that came up, this question of where he was in college in China, whether he was there, whether he really wasn't. He sort of said, hey, I'm a knucklehead at times, that I misspoke. Is that going to fly?
It's flown in Minnesota, which was his point. People who know me best heard me make this knuckleheaded remark, and they elected me to Congress or governor. They've gotten along with it. America, you should too. And he didn't say this, but I think many Democrats, if they feel they need to clean this up in any way, will say Tim Walz will never lose an embellishment battle to Donald Trump.
Nancy, I was struck by something J.D. Vance said, which was in the reproductive rights section. He said on abortion, after hearing about the various consequences of the Roe v. Wade being overturned, he then at one point said there are a lot of people that should be alive. I wonder if that is going to be something that we might see in Harris. In other words, well, yes, the consequences of Roe v. Wade being overturned are not great, and then he tried to move on. But isn't that the point?
Yes, and I think that another challenge for him was that he tried to make the case. He acknowledged that this is a difficult issue for his party, but what he described as the way out of that difficult situation was to say, well, we need to be more pro-family as a party. We need to make it easier for women to have children so that they don't feel like they need to have an abortion. The challenge is that more than half of the country believes that women should have the right to an abortion. And I don't think it's clear that the people who believe that are going to be swayed by, policies that are simply more pro-family.
Bob, what lasts here beyond the end of our conversation in terms of the man at the top of the ticket and the woman at the top of the other ticket?
For Senator Vance, he keeps his relationship with former President Donald Trump, didn't make any major mistakes that it would draw Trump's ire. I was tracking Trump's social media all night, positive about Senator Vance. And for Governor Walz, he remains that person who Vice President Harris can count on to go to battleground states and elsewhere and have a convincing personal story about being someone who was a teacher and a coach and comes from an everyday existence in Minnesota, ultimately became a House member and a governor, but came out of the education ranks and served his country in uniform.
We want to go now to Ed O'Keefe, who is there at the debate site. Ed, we just heard from our friend Bob Costa here saying that he's been monitoring President Trump and all signs a go, positive reaction. What are you hearing from the Harris-Walz campaign right now after this?
Cecilia, we're in the spin room here just down the hall from where the debate played out in the CBS Broadcast Center. This used to be a milk processing plant, and it does feel a bit like cattle is being herded here behind us as Senator Vance is now in here, as other surrogates to the two campaigns are now here making their case. The Harris-Walz team suggests that they think he did rather well up against Senator Vance in a few different key moments. One, quoting scripture at that one point during the conversation about immigrants, talking about Matthew 25, the idea that there should be empathy for all people. They say that in their internal measurements of the actual debate, that viewers that were watching liked that scene. The other part that they thought worked pretty well and that voters watching with them or that they were tracking enjoyed was the criticism of the Trump tax cuts for wealthier Americans. But they say, and Nancy was making this point earlier, that final exchange regarding the future of democracy on January 6th was most damning. They say that exchange and Vance's refusal to say who exactly won the election, the fact that he dodged questions about it, is something that they will seize on in the coming days as a reminder to skeptics, to those concerned about Trump, that once again, it appears they may be preparing to question the results of the election and stoke concerns about it. Beyond that, there were, at the beginning at least, concerns among Democrats more broadly about how the governor sort of stumbled out of the gates a bit, especially uneasy on those questions about Mideast policy and what exactly the United States should do in terms of Israel's response to Iran. Some conceding perhaps he, like Senator Vance, should be doing more interviews perhaps out on the trail. In the coming days, remember, Governor Walz is headed to central Pennsylvania to campaign. He was supposed to do that with Vice President Harris, who instead will be staying back in Washington and attending to official duties in the coming days. She'll be visiting storm damage in Georgia, and then we anticipate over the weekend heading to North Carolina. So they will not be seen together on the trail as we thought they might, so that she can attend to official duties and he'll continue campaigning in that key state of Pennsylvania, one where, of course, both he and Vance were hoping to win over support tonight.
Thank you, Ed. Caitlin Huey-Burns is also at the CBS News Broadcast Center. Caitlin, what are you hearing from the Trump-Vance camp?
Well, the Trump campaign is essentially doing a victory lap. Quite literally, they were eager to come into this spin room and talk to reporters, senior advisors, campaign manager, and Donald Trump Jr., who, of course, is very close with J.D. Vance and was influential in that decision to name him as VP. But notably, I was talking to a campaign source who was heavily involved in this preparation, and they noted that there was in the prep a kind of conscious effort to focus on J.D. Vance's personal side, knowing that this was going to be an introduction of sorts to millions of Americans watching. And if you think about it, going back to when J.D. Vance was announced as the running mate, remember, he was told 20 minutes before this was announced that he would be the running mate. Then they had the convention, and the focus was very much on the top of the ticket and Donald Trump. And then came these interviews that were discovered that J.D. Vance had done, these controversial statements that he had made in podcast interviews and kind of other forums. They see this as a kind of a reset, but mostly to focus personal stories on the economy, which they believe is a deciding factor in this election.
All right, Caitlin, thank you so much.